School lockdowns are a very serious matter. Within minutes, people's lives can be changed forever or ended altogether. This is a very dark video, and certainly not for the faint of heart. Proceed with caution, as viewer discretion is strongly advised. But with that being said, it's time to get comfortable and let the darkness take control. Number 1. A few years back, I went to a fairly small school in the Midwest/Great Lakes area. I started my day pretty much like usual. I went to the cafeteria and got a muffin, unknowingly walking right by the table of the shooting. I was running a bit late, so the bell had rung a while before I'd even left the cafeteria. I made it about halfway to class, when I heard a couple of loud pops and some screams and stuff. I headed back towards the cafeteria, thinking someone had set off a firecracker. I made it pretty close before I noticed that people were still running and screaming. I was in a hallway that formed a T intersection with the hallway that led to the cafeteria. I was maybe 20 feet away when I saw a kid I knew go running past the end of the hallway, chased by the gunman. He got shot, got up, and kept running. The gunman shot again a few times, but by then I was sprinting back to my AP history class. The kid I saw survived, but he will never walk again. 3 other kids died from an execution-style gunshot to the back of the head. I later learned that I had actually walked by the table about a minute before. I made it back to my classroom just when the PA system announced the lockdown. I told the teacher what happened. He was an ex-Marine, non-combat, but he was still solid, 6'8" dude. He stood up and went to the wall locker and pulled out a baseball bat and told us to get into a corner and stood by the door. The teachers were honestly amazing that day. In addition to my story, one of the teachers likely saved the running kid's life. We'll call him Wayne from now on. Wayne had kept running all the way until we got outside this teacher's room. We'll call the teacher Mr. Simon. Mr. Simon did the same thing my teacher had done, except that he also had a bulletproof vest handy in his wall locker. Again, small white suburban school, no idea why he felt it was necessary. Very smart man, and in no way nutty, just careful I guess. He put it on, unlocked his now locked door, and pulled Wayne into his room. He locked the door behind him. Another teacher called Harry then chased him from the building. Harry happened to be a rather large football coach. He was the study hall monitor, and initially chased the shooter out of the cafeteria as well. He stopped to check in on the boys, and when he realized that the shooter was still pursuing someone, he left and started chasing him down. I know he was shot at least once, because my friend says that he jumped behind a vending machine to avoid it. Next time we were in school, no more vending machine. I guess that the shooter was out of bullets, and by the time he chased him out the building, he went to the back and sat with the boys until paramedics arrived. I will never be able to express my gratitude for what he did for me and my friends that day. Even though they were probably already gone, just the fact that he was there was nice to know. It was just so surreal. One minute it was all screaming, and the next I was just sitting where I normally sat at 8:15. I ended up throwing up a few hours later, once the adrenaline had worn off. Since then, I've had problems with both opiates and sleeping aids, though I managed to kick both of these habits before college. I still have flashbacks from time to time, and some nightmares, but at least I can sleep. It only gets bad around the anniversary, and sometimes when I see other shootouts in the news. Sandy Hooks was a rough time for a lot of my former classmates, I still never sit with my back to the door unless I absolutely have to. I still jump at the sound of gunshots and cars that backfire every once in a while. I am relatively lucky. I was really only close with one of the guys that was killed, and I spoke a fair bit to the other two. It absolutely destroyed some people, I know. Heroin and pills have already killed one, and I see it slowly destroying another every time I check my Twitter feed. Other friends still have trouble sleeping, and I still get semi-regular calls just to talk about PTSD. It's terrible. I still hate being home from college. I don't think I really get out of my funk until I'm out of town. The worst was probably the fact that we were officially back in school by Friday, when the shooting was on the Monday. Just being back in the building was poison. We didn't get shit done for at least a month, even the kids who were not directly affected. I don't know who was responsible for that decision, but I would punch them in the face if I had a chance. Number 2. It was 5th period, which is right after lunch, and I was sitting in my geography class, which was actually located in a small room inside the library because of overcrowding. Class had just started when the intercom came on and the principal's voice shaking yelled, "This is a lockdown situation. This is not a drill. This is a lockdown situation." You could hear the commotion in the background. Everyone freaked out. We were really confused because how could something happen at our school when a shooting had just happened at a neighbouring school a month before? My teacher ran over and locked the door. The room didn't have any windows to the outside. Just one that looked into the library, since we were in a room within a room. He just kept telling us to stay calm. We kept asking about what was happening, but he didn't know any more than we did. Some time passed. We heard helicopters above, but nothing else. Some kids were freaking out and crying. Others were trying to distract themselves, but mostly, everyone was sitting on their desks or on the floor silently. I sat on the floor and kept looking at the doors, imagining someone busting through and killing me. I kept thinking that I didn't want to die, but I was convinced I was about to. Since I was in the library, I kept thinking back to Columbine, and I thought I would be the first target. I have never felt fear like that before. After a while, my teacher went through a side door into the librarian's office. We could hear that a TV or radio was on, and I think they were watching/listening to the news coverage of whatever was happening. Then he came back, and we asked to know what was happening, but he wouldn't tell us. He just told us to stay calm, and then put on the Karate Kid movie. I was pissed, but in retrospect, I could understand why he didn't tell us. More time went past, and then my teacher told us after a phone call that it would be safe to leave, and a SWAT team would be coming through to clear out the rooms and escort us to safety. He said to drop all our things and stand with our hands on the top of our heads. We did, and then the door opened and the SWAT officers were pointing rifles at us, with one line of other officers doing the same thing behind him. They entered the room, looked, searched around, and then ordered us to walk out single file with our hands on our heads. We did. As I was walking out crying, I smiled at an officer and said thank you. He nodded and winked. They escorted us to the park across the street, where our parents were waiting. Since only a few kids had cell phones, we had to just wander around until we found them. As I was sobbing and looking for my parents, there were news reporters and cameras approaching me and the other kids, asking questions. I ignored them, but I am still disgusted by that. I should have punched them in their face. It should be illegal to approach children for interviews after shit like that. I finally found my parents and started sobbing. We hugged, and they explained what had happened as they drove me home, as they're both cops. It turned out that a kid had brought in a shotgun and shot at the administration office window and at students and teachers around it. Luckily, there was a police officer on campus at the time, because of the shooting at the other school a few weeks ago. He immediately confronted the shooter and shot him in the face and buttocks, and then he was taken into custody. I believe it all happened in the span of a few minutes. Nobody died, but 5 people were injured, but none seriously. When I got home, I turned on the TV. They had identified the shooter. It was a senior I had sat next to in class for an entire semester. We worked on projects together. He was definitely an outcast, and I thought he was kind of weird, but I didn't think he would do something like that. I talked to him a fair amount in class. He did get really angry very quickly over small things, like if he did badly on a test or something. Instead of dropping it, he'd curse and throw his pencil around and act as if it were the end of the world, and not speak to anyone for the rest of the day. Sometimes he would come to class and just look super pissed off and not talk to anyone all day. Other days he'd be really nice to me, and we'd strike up conversations. Looking back, I think he may have had a crush on me. I remember one time correcting his test and signed my name at the bottom. I always dotted my I's with hearts, and he asked, "Is that heart for me?" I laughed and said no. He didn't talk to me for the rest of class that day. He ended up hanging himself in jail before his trial ended. It came out that he had been abused his whole life and had just been rejected from the military before he did the shooting. I had nightmares for years about him killing himself. I cried about it sometimes. I always wondered if there was something that I could have said or done to stop him from doing what he did. I also wondered if he would have come to my class, if he would have shot me or spared me. A lot of people immediately hated him and wished the cop would have killed him on the spot instead of just wounding him. But I don't. I wish he would have had a better life, or at least served time and found peace and became a better person. I know he wasn't an evil person. There was good inside him. He just needed help and didn't get it. Number 3. It wasn't a shooting as in Columbine, but when I was in the 8th grade, a 7th grader brought a gun to school. He was playing with it in music class while they were watching a Disney movie, the songs from which they would be singing later in their recital. I think it was Aladdin, but anyway, the original guy who brought it in passed it to him, and he was fiddling with it. Later, he ended up dropping it on his desk. It went off and struck and killed the little boy sitting directly in front of him. So the school went on to complete lockdown. I, as I said, was in 8th grade and was in algebra on the other side of the school, so no one knew what the hell was going on because we didn't hear the gun go off. In hindsight, it was awful because we just used the sudden absence of our teachers to piss around. I knew we had no way of knowing, but this little boy just died and we were throwing paper footballs at each other. So for a couple of hours we just sat in this room. Our teacher, who was normally this super chill, mild-mannered guy, had been all, "No one leaves this room or there will be hell to pay," or something like that. So we didn't. I didn't think we even left to use the bathroom. There was one kid who was coming back from a dentist appointment. I don't envy him. The sight of all the police and the tape and the ambulance. I'm sure there was a lot of palpable horror going on. He was not allowed back in school that day. The families of the shooter and the victims were close, and I believe they were even neighbours. A lot of us went to his funeral. He was so tiny. It was heartbreaking. Number 4. The shooting at my high school was an isolated incident, so I never felt scared. I was honestly more surprised it happened at all. It was one of those things that could have happened anywhere, and no one would have given it a second thought. but because it happened in our parking lot, it made CNN. I went to a high school in a very safe and small town. They called a Code Red, set to start after the first lunch period and before the second. Some of the kids in my class freaked out, since they had never been in school during a Code Red before. My teacher and I calmed everyone down, saying it was probably a medical emergency, and they needed the hallways clears for EMTs. We even joked that it couldn't be a shooter, because what kind of shooter gives a 10-minute warning? So time passes, and they finally give us information. Turns out there was a shooting. A girl who had just started attending our high school, after transferring from an alternative high school, met her ex-boyfriend in the parking lot. He just said he was going to give her some of her things back, when he reaches into his backpack and grabs a gun and shoots her 4 times. Her mother immediately drives the car between the two of them, and he kills himself. There were a lot of people who looked scared and went home. I looked at my little sister and said that we were staying because there was no danger for us. She said okay. The girl who was shot survived, and a few months later gave birth to a child. At the time of the incident, the shooter's parents had left him alone for a few days, and he had stopped taking his behavioral medication. That undoubtedly contributed to why the shooting happened. Number 5. In 6th grade, my maths class was located in a first-floor classroom, maybe 30 feet from the main entrance to the school. On this particular day, we had a substitute teacher. About halfway through the class, an announcement comes over the PA system. Attention all teachers, please bring your gradebooks to the principal's office immediately. It is apparent that our renter-teacher was confused. My classmates and I look around at each other confused, and we all collectively arrive at, well, what? We were all so confused. So we all did the logical thing, and figured out we should help the substitute teacher find our actual teacher's gradebook, so the sub can take it to the office. Hey, they made an announcement about it and the principal was involved. I'm not going to be that guy that argues. The door to the classroom is open. No one is being quiet, and about half our class is standing, milling around in full view of the first floor windows that look onto our town's one major road. The gradebook, however, still eludes us. We can't find anything on the desk, or anything inside the drawers. We look inside the teacher's closet, but there's really nothing there. So we give up. The substitute, now frazzled, and by our estimation late for her date with the principal, grabs the planner and her notes from the day, and leaves the room, heading towards the office on the other side of the hall. We are a loud buzzing mass of 6th graders in the open-doored classroom closest to the main entrance of the building, and we are now lacking in supervision. At the time the buzzer sounds, all the periods end. We're still confused. Should we leave? I peek out into the hallway and notice that no other classes have been dismissed yet. And then I see her. Our substitute, replete with old lady printed dress, thick trimmed glasses and heels, is positively galloping down the hall towards the room, waving at me frantically to get back inside. Something, it seems, is amiss. Red-faced and panting, having dropped her planner somewhere in the 100-yard dash, she gets back into the room and slams the door shut. With all semblance of secrecy long blown, Substitute Bot 9000 just says, "There is a suspected murderer somewhere within the mile radius of the school. Get away from the windows, we're turning off the lights, all be quiet. This is not a drill." We oblige. An hour of tense and awkward silence later, we're given the all clear. The guy had been picked up by local police and we were out of danger. Needless to say, the lockdown code was revised after that particular incident. Number 6. When I was a junior in '98, I was in the office applications class when the school went on lockdown. We didn't know at first what had happened. I remember someone coming to the door and motioning for my teacher to come speak with him. After a few moments of hushed discussion, the man left and my teacher shut and locked the door. She went to the front of the class and in a very somber voice she explained to us that we were going to be staying in the class until the end of the day, and maybe even longer, if the police wanted us to stay put. We asked her what was wrong, and she got choked up and made a weird sound, a cross between a sob and a cough. She told us with tears in her eyes that a boy named Nick Creason had been shot outside, and that it didn't look like he was going to make it. A few girls in the back of the class began gasping, and some of them started crying. One of their friends was a girl named Tanya, who was Nick's girlfriend at the time. They all knew each other. Apparently Nick had been falling out with this other guy, Jacob Davis, over Tanya's affections. Jacob had gotten angry that she was seeing this other guy after dumping him, so he confronted him about it in the parking lot. He shot him there with a rifle, and Nick died in hospital. 3 lives were ruined that day. Nick's, which was forever lost, Tanya's, who was never the same again after that, and Jacob, who is now serving life in prison, not to mention the family of the 3 of them. All of that over a girl. Even when I was a know-nothing kid of a girl in high school, I knew that no boyfriend or girlfriend was ever worth committing murder for. But I'd never had to walk in anyone else's shoes, so I don't know what goes on in the minds of those angry people. I just wish it had never happened. It was right after Columbine, and it put our sleepy town school on the map and in the public eye. It's selfish and strange of me, but I'm glad I didn't personally know any of the people involved. It was easier to deal with by distancing myself from it. It made it seem less real. Number 7. I was in my American history class at the time when the shooting happened. The shooting took place in the main office of the school, and my class was to the far left of the school. It was during lunch hour, but my class had already came back off lunch. At the time of the shooting, I had earbuds in, because we were working on a project for class. My friend bumped me, and told me that we were in code red, and we had to do the procedural stuff. Lights off, no one in sight of the windows or the door, and everyone sitting on the ground. No one talking and no cell phones. The no talking rule always gets broken, because people always want to hear about what the other people think is going on. The year of the shooting I was a freshman. The shooter was a senior, and had been suspended due to doing donuts in the parking lot. He left school, did some K2, and came back with his father's loaded handgun and shot the vice principal and the principal. The principal survived, but the vice principal did not. The student left the building and drove somewhere, parked, and took his own life. Sad thing was that the vice principal had a son that taught at our school. I didn't have him as a teacher, but he took a few weeks off after the shooting. And all the while I was working on my American history project, not knowing what happened until someone announced on the intercom what had happened. After a couple of hours of being in code red, police started to escort classrooms outside the building. Rough next couple of days for some time. Number 8. I went to an inner city school, and for us, lockdowns were a regular thing. They happened several times per year, but they were never serious, except one. It was my junior year, and at the end of the previous school day, a text started spreading around the school. It read something to the effect of, "High school students, be careful. Tomorrow is going to get interesting. The Blue Rules gang are going to spray." I didn't think much of it, even though it was a fairly odd happening. Apparently overnight the message spread to some members of the school administrators. I arrived at school the next day, and there was a palpable tension in the air. I went into my first class as usual, and on my way through, I noticed a few more police officers than I was used to. I arrived to my first class of the day, and the school bell rang. Our teacher began class by alerting us all to the fact that the text message had been copied into a school email and spread to all the teachers and faculty, and that there was a large police presence at and around the school. One kid asked how big it was. The teacher then informed us that there were officers forming a tight perimeter around the school, and that there was an entire SWAT team split between the roof and the lower levels. My first class ended with nothing happening, and I made my way to my second. About 20 to 25 minutes into class, a voice came over the intercom. "Students, listen carefully. The red folder made it back to the front office. Thank you so much for participating." The students and teachers sprang into action. At my school, if something was going wrong in the area and we were on lockdown, the folder was yellow. If the trouble is in the immediate area or on the school grounds, the folder was red. If the problem was in the building, the folder was black. It was our code to keep the intruders guessing or something like that. But the folder was red, and we wondered what the hell was going on. We all gathered in the corner of a dark room on the same side as the door to make sure that we could hardly be seen. People were frantically looking at their smartphones to see if there were any news updates, which of course there were not. We were stuck there for about 2.5 hours, whilst the police had a standoff with the gang members who had showed up at the school. They were all arrested, and then everyone was released. We are so lucky that nothing serious happened, and that we were warned beforehand. Number 9. This happened in 2014. I'm a senior in high school and would be graduating this year. I remember feeling dreadful and not wanting to go to school because somehow I knew something bad was going to happen. After arguing with myself to whether or not go to school, I texted my friends and decided to tell my mum that I wouldn't be going today, as we'd only be watching movies at school and eat free food given out by the teachers. I convinced her and went to sleep. 2 of my friends also told me that they would not be going. Then I received a text from my dad and friends that came from the school, saying, "The school is on lockdown. All students and staff are to remain inside class. The police are on their way." A student was allegedly threatening all staff with a weapon in his hand. It's not uncommon for our school to go into lockdown. It's happened twice in the last 5 years. At first, my school wasn't as bad as it is right now. We had student council, and we looked up to them to regulate school rules, and always are the ones to stop fights or anything that will harm the students. When the seniors, who were all part of the student council, graduated, everything turned sour. My school was then reported for drug dealers, fights in schools, and my school wanting to fight with another school and bomb threats. I can recall events where police were escorting a student a year below mine. So this wasn't anything that was surprising, except for the last bit. I read it again to make sure I was reading it right, and I was. The next day, my friends who were at school told me what happened. Apparently, a guy who's 6 foot tall went on a rampage with a teacher because she told him that he would not be graduating as he hadn't done enough work this year. The creepy thing though was that he was in the same year as me. I often used to see him at school, and he looked harmless. He broke the school's window in the 700 block, went to the cooking class and grabbed a kitchen knife as a weapon, threatened everyone that he was about to kill them. They called the police and made the students go to their class and remain in class until the police got to the school. Fortunately, there were brave students that knew how to defend themselves and decided to imprison the student into a closet slightly taller than the student. Someone managed to kick the knife out of his hand and pushed him into a closet and locked it until the police arrived. I don't know what happened after that. There were rumours that he was put in jail, suspended, expelled, or went to another school. It was a good thing that I wasn't there. Many times my instinct has saved me from danger, and this is one of those times that I am grateful. Number 10. Back when I was in first year, I was sitting in maths class, third last period of the day. About 15 minutes into the class though, bang! We were jolted out of our maths-induced comas by the sound. The classroom was situated on the top of an old staircase, which amplified the sound, which also happened to have emanated just from the bottom of the staircase in an adjoining hallway. The teacher told us to stay in our seats and walk to the next class to find out where this aforementioned bang had originated from. It was then announced over the intercom that all students were to remain in their class for the rest of the day. We spent the rest of the day up there, doing our homework and speculating what the hell the sound had been. When the end of the day came, we were escorted by buses. Usually we could walk down unattended on this long detour round the school, whereas we usually would have made the journey in about 30 seconds. This one took 2 minutes. First sign of trouble was seeing 3 marked police cars at the front of the school. Second sign was seeing 2 officers with MP5 submachine guns standing by one of the main student entrances. The third and final, and most damning sign of trouble, was the fact that of the 4 large plain glass windows to some of the front-facing classrooms, 2 had been completely shattered inwards. On the bus home, further speculation suggested it had been a bomb. Others said it was a massive firework of some kind. Some of my friends had been closer to the source of the explosion and said that one of the teachers had a breakdown later on. The next day, the window had been repaired, but an area of the school was still damaged. There had been lockers beside a small set of stairs and double doors in front of the steps. The doors were splintered, and the lockers no longer there. It eventually emerged that the source of the explosion had been quite a large firework, which the school seniors had fashioned, with a time delay fuse somehow using cigarettes or something that allowed them to detonate it when no one would actually be in the vicinity. To many this probably seems quite mundane, but big fireworks are seriously dangerous. It's quite fortunate that no one happened to be in that area at the time when the idiots decided to set it off. Unfortunately, no one was expelled, even though it is such a stupid thing to do. Hey guys, it's Mort here, and thank you so much for listening. This was certainly a very dark video, probably one of the darkest I've made in a while. If you'd like to take a break from horror for a little, and delve into something potentially a bit more light-hearted, my brother has just started a YouTube channel about history. It would mean the world to me if you checked it out. You can follow the link on screen now or in the description to view it. And remember to smash that like button and let me know what you thought in the comments section below, and subscribe before you head on over. But anyway, for now guys, I'm going to sign off. Stay awesome, and I'll see you in the next one.